All right, I can't believe I'm talking about Killer Klowns from Outer Space with famous YouTuber Christian Johnsman. This is going to put the Cult of Films on the map finally. All right, the Zoomer address he gave me was FUQOFFSTALKER@hotmails.com. Ah, that's weird. It says this account doesn't exist. Maybe I spelled it wrong. Beginning to think he gave me the wrong address on purpose. Great. Now I have to see who's available on short notice to talk about Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Alright, let's go through the old guest list. Let's see. Tony is shooting a softcore spaghetti western for cats. Jason is doing a podcast about chia pet parenting. And Johnny Mulligans, of course, drank a whole gallon of Ardbeg. Oh wait, Chris and Ian from Bad Movie Night are still suffering from PTSD from watching Grandmother's House. Oh wait a minute. King Dooker. That's a strange name. Oh well, at least he's royalty. I wonder if he knows about Killer Klowns. You know what? I'm gonna DM him. Hello, Mr. the King. Would you like to review Killer Klowns from Outer Space? Send. Oh, wow, that was really quick. I just ate 4 cans of chili and drank 2 gallons of milk. Give me 3 minutes and we'll blow it up. I should have done makeup tutorials. Killer Klowns from Outer Space is a 1988 American science fiction horror comedy film directed by the Chiodo brothers, starring Grant Kramer, Suzanne Snyder, Joan Allen Nelson, Royal Dano, and John Vernon.
Killer Klowns from Outer Space.
Pizza?
Maybe they're just cruising through the galaxy and stopped here for a bite to eat.
You don't need a police pal, you need a psychiatrist. They want to play games? They're messing with the wrong guy.
What are you in for?
Killer Klowns from Outer Space. It's crazy.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. For the very first time, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest. All the way from the throne itself, the one and only King Dooker. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for addressing me as a king. I ain't never been a king in my life. They flushed me out of the Royal Academy. But I am currently locked in my bathroom because my roommate, Idiot Jeff, said I smelled again. So it might be a little choppy, so just sort of bear with us.
We've been trying to get this going for a while now because I think that you are one of the criminally most underwatched YouTube reviewers in the entire little pantheon of YouTube reviewers.
Just the Dooker, if you want to be formal. Basically, I'm making reviews that you can watch while you Duke, that are Duke, that the quality is sort of Duke. You've got things to do, and I respect that. So I don't want to keep you too long.
Well, sir, with my IBS, I was able to watch your entire playlist in one sitting, because that's the type of Dukes that I suffer through. But it looks like you have a nice cocktail with you for your throne sitting.
Yes, I've got some low sugar, low calorie G2 Gatorade. It might balance me out a little bit, so I might not go off on crazy tangents about Trash Johnson, the scummiest man alive, and I might focus a little more on the movie at hand. What were we reviewing again?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I am joined by my big beer. It's an Icicle Brewing. It's called Enchantments. It's a hazy IPA, 6.7% from somewhere in Washington State. I'm sure it's fantastic. I'm going to be pouring this. I am all about the hazy IPAs lately because we are talking about Killer Klowns from Outer Space. That's right. Why are we talking about Killer Klowns from Outer Space like every other hack YouTuber out there?
Because Killer Klowns from Outer Space is a fucking masterpiece, and it deserves to be talked about by everybody.
That's true. I'm going to say cheers to your gastric health, your intestinal fortitude. L'chaim, sir.
And I want to say cheers to one of the most benevolent hosts.
Killer Klowns from Outer Space is probably the prototypical cult, like the definition of what a cult film is. I know this film only costs like, $1.8 million. I couldn't get the actual returns box office wise, but I can't imagine that it made a ton of money. I mean, it did come out in, in 88, so I don't know. I didn't do, such a deep dive like to see what it was up against, but I don't remember it like breaking the bank or like breaking the box office wide open. I actually think it kind of flopped, but it's one of those films that definitely has a life since then. That's what a cult film does. How did you first find this film?
It was almost like an instant cult hit. Came out around the time that the 80s was trying to replicate everything from the 50s. And one of the things that you hear them mention a lot, especially in the commentary track, is the fact that they were inspired by the Blob. Something happens in a small town, kids see it, kids discover it, cops are like, hey, I don't believe you. Then the thing attacks the town, and these kids, of course, are in their 30s, but they're college age, I guess. 30s college.
I was gonna save this question until later on when I'm going through like what I disliked about this film. You're just so prophetic because like Mike and I think what her name's Mike and Debbie. They're in a lover's lane, right? So that, a lot of those, especially 80s, like early 90s movies had that like lover's lane scene. But typically that's where like the teenagers go to hook up. And from what I know, like Debbie just dated like a cop that was out, like graduated, obviously like cop school. So he's got to be like, what, mid-20s at the very youngest. So it's just like, if this isn't like a teenage, like lover's lane type deal, it's just a straight up like swinger spot. Like, how old is Mike and Debbie really?
So I thought the same thing. I'm like, so they're supposed to be high school, right? Even though one's sporting gray hairs and basically balding. But it turns out it is college kids. It's a college town. They mention it multiple times, at least in the commentary track. Maybe not as prominently in the movie, but there's a lot that they leave out in the movie that they were talking about. Like there's supposed to be a longer backstory on Mike Tobacco's his name, by the way.
Great name.
Tobacco's wow, kids. Don't smoke it. Do heroin. Put it in between your toes. Nobody sees it. Mike Tobacco and the Tenenzi twins. No, is that their name? The dicks in the ice cream truck. They're all based on the Chiodo's childhood friends. Basically, there's all these like little things that they added in that they were going to explain, and the executives were like, nobody wants to listen to them talk. Cut that nonsense. Get to the clowns. So that sort of got pushed by the wayside.
And that they did. I have to say, like, this thing, because I think the Chiodo brothers are mostly known for being effects artists. And that's what, I mean, if you want to talk about what really works in this film is the makeup and the decisions, and even the decisions that like didn't go their way. Because I know like the end boss, this is kind of jumping ahead, but like Jojo the Clown was initially supposed to be a claymation figurine, and I'm so glad that didn't work out, because it was one of the Chiodo brothers actually got in the Jojo costume. And it's just like, if you think about that's what makes this so iconic, because if the quality of the clowns were anything less than they were, I don't think this would have been such a cult hit.
This movie, its entire selling point is the aesthetic, the clown aesthetic, the clown circus motifs, all the gimmicks that are played off of it. Not to jump too far ahead, but Jojo and just balloon animal dogs. And what's funny is the Chiodos, even though they are famous for special effects, and if I could cheat plug real quick, I sort of misrepresent in my review, they actually weren't the leads on the special effects. Like they came up with, I want to say, the concept art and everything, and they helped, but they handed it off to more of a team that way they could work on the production and the the directing, the filming, stuff like that.
Whatever decisions worked out, or during previs or not, it definitely worked out. Also, the diversity of like things that they came up with, like they crammed the kitchen sink in here. They're just like, the premise itself is batshit crazy. Popcorn shooters, which I guess that prop was like the most expensive thing to make in the entire movie, which is funny because they were like flipping cars and ice cream trucks and shit, but it's like this like Nerf looking popcorn shooter because it literally shot popcorn. Like they made it actually a functioning like popcorn gun. That, and then the popcorn kernels turned into these like crazy snake monsters, all came together in this like wonderful soup. The shadow demon, like they're just like, it's like Pee-wee Herman's Big Adventure meets a cheesy horror movie, and it just worked so well.
And they worked on Pee-wee's Big Adventure. They did the stop motion for Large Marge. They do a lot of stop motion, which, to your point, that's why they wanted to make JoJo, the Clownzilla, into stop motion. But yeah, the popcorn gun was about $7,000, I believe. And like you said, they shot real popcorn, only for a production assistant or someone to tell them, oh, we could have done that for like $100. And they're like, oh, bummer. And if we can touch on those baby clown popcorn things, they have a weird incubation time. Because if you look at, the Big Top Burger guy, it almost immediately those things attack him, and then you've got Debbie who's taking a shower for about 3.5 hours.
Sure.
And they are just born then. Or perhaps maybe the incubation time was shorter, but you know what I mean. Like, good 20 minutes passes before one attacks the other.
I was quite surprised and, dare I say, impressed that they didn't take the easy off ramp and just show like tons of boobs in this too. Like, I'm not, whatever, I like boobs, but it's just like in any other scene we would have had like some, gross like lingering shot on Debbie in the shower. Instead we got to see like the laundry, like shift and move and like really kind of build up tension, because this movie it's hilarious. It is really funny, but it does have, like, tonally, it has those good spots of like real horror and terror and tension building.
Beginning, for one, it's the classic with Royal Dano and his dog. Poor dog, by the way.
I know.
Building up to that. But going back to your point, yeah, it's a PG-13 movie, but I will say there are some tits in it, some expanding tits or boobs. Should I say tits? True. Should I say boobs? I don't know. I like them both.
When they're clowns, they're tits. Yeah.
To the female clowns.
How could I forget? Which the Terenzi brothers were so down for too.
And it's actually a very progressive movie in the sense that it isn't, because movies like to be movies like that like to be crass. Like I also compare it to Humanoids from the Deep, that came out around 1984, very similar in structure. And there's like these graphic, uncomfortable like rape scenes. And it's always, the man on woman scene. And in this, it sort of flips the switch because their clothes are ripped and they're covered in lipstick. And it's just like, was this consensual? And let me tell you something about non-consensual sex. Don't do it.
Okay. That was getting real hairy for a second. Yeah, I mean...
If you want to talk hairy, I can pull down my shirt. But that's not consensual either.
That's a different kind of show, which I'm not opposed to, but maybe we'll finish up Killer Klowns first. It's the Patreon-only episode for After Hours. Usually we go into it and we talk about, the premise of Killer Klowns from Outer Space. We kind of already touched on that, though. If you haven't seen the film, why are you watching a YouTube, show called The Cult of Films? You probably seen this if you're watching this right now. So we're just, we're going to go heavy into spoilers and we're just going to talk about it. I mean, the premise is simple as you have this couple and they're in this lover's lane, and then this meteor comes and boom, we have clowns.
A lot of inspiration was taken from the Blob, and it's funny that they said that because when I was younger and not so mentally ill, I always sort of put these two movies together in my mind. I don't know if it's because I watched them back to back. They came out in the same year, but in my mind, it always shines out. They have the credits with the outline, outer glow in the background, and you've got Jon Vernon as Mooney, who, by the way, wonderful. And then you have Joe Sineka as Dr. Meadows in the Blob. And for some reason, I always pair that up. We watched it and they were talking about on the commentary that, oh yeah, we took a lot of inspiration from the Blob. I was like, oh, great minds or minds.
Let's talk a little bit about the cast. We've already mentioned Mike Tobacco, which again, just such an underrated like movie name. They just like his last name didn't have to be Tobacco. And then you have Debbie Stone, who is just like softcore porn name. So they just really went for it. Of Curtis Mooney, like you said, Jon Vernon. I think Jon Vernon basically stole every scene he was in. Even when he was like had a clown's like hand up his ass doing the marionette scene. Like he was just chewing up the scenery, and I loved every minute that he was on there.
Jon Vernon stole this movie. If him and the Klowns stole this movie, and we can jump back real quick to, while you're watching a review about Killer Klowns, if you've never seen it, if you need inspiration to go see this, or you need a push to go see it, show it to your friends with chlorophobia. It's a great time, trust me. But jumping back to Jon Vernon, he's great. Then you have Grant Kramer as Mike Tobacco, and then Susan Snyder as Debbie Stone. And while they tried to play Mike Tobacco as like the dumb character and Debbie Stone as the smart character, I'm going to say Susan Snyder's acting is so bad in this movie. Every line of her, it's just like, did she know what she's saying? Did she forget the script? Was there a script? I'm sure there was a script for dialogue.
Well, and it's just so awkward because they set up kind of a love triangle between Mike Tobacco, you have Debbie, and then it's revealed, it's unpackaged that Dave, the hunky beat cop, is also, he and Debbie just got out of a relationship. He has such like stalker predatory like tendencies. Talking to Mike like, oh, don't worry, like we're totally broken up, that it's over. And he's just like, I love Debbie the whole time. He's just like, and Mike's just like, fuck, I don't know what to do because I don't want to get shot by this stalker cop. So it's like the triangle in the beginning of the movie is just like Dave is like hugging her aggressively, and then like Mike's patting them both on the back, and to the very end where they're just in a complete like polyamorous relationship, and Mike is like jumping and like kind of dry humping Dave when he gets out of the clown car at the end. So I'm glad that this has a true love story with an arc in it.
Got Dave, John Allen Nelson, also known by the way, Paul the wine guy from Friends. I looked that little tidbit up and I was like, he had a career sort of after this.
You're right.
Yeah. Dave's got this weird control freak thing going on. He means well, but it just, once again, it's clunky writing, sort of like how my speech is sort of clunky and my mind is everywhere. And they do get there sort of, but they never really reconcile it in any sort of way because, as you said, meets back up with them. It's not Mike she goes to, it's Dave.
Right, yeah.
And I felt that.
You felt Mike's nuts just completely shrivel, yeah.
I see that happening on the screen because it's like the exact same circumstances. Somebody falls out of a giant balloon and just takes off with them.
Let's I want to give a little bit of shit to the Klowns' motivations, because I just, I kind of went off on a good tangent saying that I appreciate the level of different things that the Klowns kind of use at their disposal. They go to that cotton candy like gun quite a bit, which is cool. Like I like that whole idea, but then like, okay, so the Klowns want to take over the town so they could turn the townspeople into Capri Suns to drink, but then like that one clown is trying to lure the little girl at the burger place, and it looks like he was just gonna smash her with a mallet, and then like there's the other like really cool scene where the clown is like riding like a invisible motorcycle and rams the guy off the bridge just to kill him. They put Debbie in a balloon where everyone else is cocooned right away. So I understand that the Debbie thing is probably more like, well, she's one of the main characters, so of course she has to make it out alive. But I don't know. Were you as like frustrated as I was, or am I reading too much into it as like the clown's motivations?
They're choppy, to say the least. Once again, I'm going to cite the commentary. They had mentioned that they had left it sort of vague. There's that part near the end where they're sort of guessing at why they're here. These motherfuckers think they're Quentin Tarantino. It's inconsistent. You know, they want to kill the little girl. They just cause this random mayhem, like the Big Top Burger guy. Once again, he just gets eaten sort of by the little baby clowns. But yeah, I guess you could argue that they do that to make them grow into bigger clowns. If we want to play mental gymnastics, though, I guess we could say that they used the balloon as a way to hold her over because they had overfilled the cotton candy cocoons, because you get the scene in the beginning where the cotton candy, it's, you know, there's 4 or 5, and then the entire thing is filled. By the way, giant body count in this movie, if you think about it, because,
absolutely,
you know, and you look at the cocoons and you see like different sizes, and you're like, some of these kids didn't make it. Like,
or the dog.
You see, yeah, the dog behind Pooh Bear. Poor Pooh.
Poor Pooh.
You see his, and it's noticeably smaller.
I think this is one of the largest death counts in a horror movie. Like, they wiped out the entire town, and they didn't even like try. They didn't even like, you know, in another movie they would have had like the town scientist or like the biology teacher, and he's just like, oh, I could reverse the cocoon poison, and then, you know, all the little kids will come out, and, you know, we'll have this nice scene at the end. They're like, no, fuck it, just blow the whole thing up. Like, they're already like mush. Like, let's just move on. I appreciate them going for it.
It's always good when a movie doesn't like cop out with stuff like that. I like to cite Slither is another one that does something like that, where it's, you know, people get possessed or something, and when they take out the head, everybody else just drops dead. It's not like, oh, I'm free from this mind control.
Yeah.
As a victim of mind control, I appreciate it, I guess.
Like you said, you were just watching the commentary track, and for whatever reason, I remember the scene, you know, vividly of Fatso the Clown. You get to see him break out that giant like jumbo straw with all the kinks in it, and I remember during the rewatch for this episode, and I'm just like, so I know he watched the commentary. What were they saying about that scene in particular? For some reason, that was always the scene where I'm like, if I were to watch the commentary for this movie, I would like to see, you know, for whatever reason about that straw.
They're always going for humor, and like just about, I'd say most of the scenes, they were going for over-the-top humor and the clown motif, and they're just like, you know, how do we get this across? And they thought, let's do a crazy straw and let's Disney World it up, you know?
Everything is over the top in the big top, I assume. You know, you don't just get random kills. Like we said, there's cotton candy deaths, there's shadow puppet deaths. I guess that was more of an apprehension. But even the killing of the clowns themselves is a huge production. Like, every time, you know, Dave shoots one of the clowns in the nose, you get that really cool, like, green spin effect, which I guess they filmed pretty much practically with like mirrors and stuff. So this was all like pre-digital effects, or, you know, CGI. So that was all like stuff you had to put together.
They used a lot of matting for, you know, the background, stuff like that. And then if you pay close enough attention, some of the scenes like that, like turning Debbie into a balloon, it's one of those things where they're shooting the scene, they have it stuck on the tripod, and they're like, okay, go. And they do the scene, and then they're like, okay, now you get out of the way. And then they spend the 5 minutes setting up the scene while everybody, like, while the people that are still in the scene stand still. And then it's like, okay, go. And they do that cut. And if you watch it enough, you see that, like, you know, obviously nobody can really stand still in the same spot for 5-10 minutes. You see, like, a little bit of jostling and the fade away. That scene with the clown nose, they started to run out of, they're like, you know, it's so expensive every time they do it. By the end, it was sort of just like off screen and you saw some lights flash and then throw some glitter.
And not just like the costumes, but the sets themselves. They stretched the budget so well and did like old school movie tricks where there's a point where it's like the chase scene when they go back into the spaceship and you see our three-way, for lack of a better term, but I think that's the perfect term because they gonna fuck after this. They're like running through that like snake's mouth, and basically they just filmed a plastic snake closer to the camera, and then you film your actors kind of far away, and they did the whole like depth perception trick that they've been doing since like the 1920s. But in the context of this film, it just works so well. Like they go into that one spot and just like for no reason at all, the pillars like start moving back and forth, and that's just like people off camera just like pushing and pulling on like little pulleys, if even that high tech. And it's just like those little things that would not work in any other film in the context of like having a fun house and killer clowns. It was perfect.
You have to have the funhouse effect, and it works perfectly as the climax. And on the point of stretching the budget, if you watch closely enough, it's clearly a warehouse. But they try to take the same set pieces and they constantly reuse them and restack them in different ways. So eventually, you just sort of see, like, you pay close enough attention, you start to see the same sets being like reused. At first, it works because when they're in the spaceship, it feels like they're in a spaceship. But eventually, as you said, once they get out of there and you start seeing the shaking things, you start to see the sides of the warehouse. Yeah. But it's still like practical effects are always going to be much more entertaining than CGI, in my opinion, because you can see something's there, and even if it looks like a little cheap or a little cheesy, it still has more of a personality.
Well, context is key, I think. Like, you don't want you don't want like pulleys and effects like that for your, Endgame or your Infinity War. Like there's a place for everything, but
yeah, like
I said, that like every trick in the book they used on this film to save money, and it doesn't feel cheap. Like it feels within itself. Like it's not like, oh god, I could see like the strings on. Yeah, I mean, you watch even like old Disney movies, like live action Disney movies, and like look at the black hole. You still see some of the seams in a production like that, and that thing had 50 times the budget as Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So I think it was perfect that effects people did this because they kind of knew how to, and like you said, they had a production company, but it was still overseen by the Chiodo brothers, and this was totally in their wheelhouse.
It's okay to see the lines in some of these movies. Like, never takes me out of the movie, especially when the movie's like, at this point, 32 years old?
You're kind of in for the ride if the movie is honest with you from the get-go.
Like, them saving money with using these tricks, it's great, and it also adds for like fun watch-throughs on things. Like, you never see a car crash into another car. You always see them cut away at the last moment, and then you'll see the car because these were rentals, and the companies were like, you can't crash the car, and the executives were like, we're not paying for crashed cars. And then retrospect being what it is, they're like, oh yeah, we should have crashed these cars. Likewise, when the Terenzi brothers, they drop down into the ball pit of sex, they don't actually drop down. They just sort of like lay on the ground in the smoke. And then you'll see in the scene, it's either Mike or Dave, they back up and they trip over one of them, clearly. And it's just, you see these fun little things like that. Gives it a rewatchability. It's just one thing I saw and I wanted to bring up. In the very beginning of the movie, when we're going through the credits, you see Mooney walk out of the Big Top Burger. You see in the background off to his right, some people sitting down at a bench, some punkers, maybe not the same punkers he arrests later on, but one of them does a cartwheel behind him into their seat. And it's just, I had to rewind it a few times. And I was like, did I see that right? Because I hallucinate.
I remember, I'm going back to the review we did for Howard the Duck, and we were talking about like the stereotypical 80s punker was always this like had glam makeup on, they're always called like the Satan sluts or whatever, and this was no different. Like we had that level, but Mooney apprehended two of them. We're just trying to have a private moment, right? They were just drinking some wine and seeing what was gonna pop up.
Okay, so the punkers in this movie were totally gay, and it's not a judgment, but you've got the two punkers in the college town walking around drinking wine in the park. They're not even up at Lover's Lane. They're at the park, away from everybody, right?
Right.
And one of them is really soft-spoken, a little effeminate. You look at his shirt, and it's got, like, hearts in New York all over it. And Mooney's the type of asshole that would arrest some people for being gay.
Right, yeah.
And it's a whole thing. This is just a theory. Once again, with movies like this, you get to sort of draw your own conclusions with these bit characters and just little stuff you pick up. I could be completely off base, but it's a fun thing to think about.
You were on base completely.
I'm on something.
Those dudes were fucking for sure, and that's fine. Like I totally am cool with that because I'm cool with that. But and they basically died because of their love, because Mooney is such a bigot. He threw him in jail just for these gentlemen trying to have a moment, and that's sad. Although that's one of the coolest scares in the film, where they lock Mooney locks the clown up with them. The clown kills Mooney, and then they kind of look at him. They're just like, "What are you in for?" And then Officer Dave goes in and is just like checking on one of them, and that's when I think the first time he sees them turn all like into jelly, and then that arm that just kind of like drops, and there's no like big sting, there's no big like loud noise or pop or anything. It's just literally an arm that falls, and that's what I'm saying. Like this movie does when it wants to go kind of more on the scary side, it does it really effectively.
Like only scene that goes for a more serious, subtle approach. Yeah. And just everything about that scene, it shows you so much about, like, as deep as the character can get, it shows you how Mooney is, how he refuses to believe anything that's being told to him by the entire town. God, where have I heard that before? He's the type of asshole that, like, somebody's not doing anything, but in his opinion, in a clown suit, and this guy is going to lock him up, and then he's going to hit him with a nightstick. Right. Mooney absolutely got his comeuppance, and like they baby-faced the clown here, but then of course he kills, the punkers in the jail cell, and it's a shame. Yeah. They never had a chance.
I would have rather seen that love arc than, what we got with, Mr. Tobacco and Dave and his rapiness. Besides, like, the obvious, like, Howard the Duck level puns, because we got, instead of duck puns, we got clown puns. Another thing that I wasn't a huge fan of, and I wish that the Cheeto brothers kind of scaled back, was like they gave the clowns like a weird little alien language, and I'm totally on board for their creepy laughter, because I think that fucking killed. I think that was probably the scarier moments in the film, is when they get rid of someone and then they just like go like really close shot on their face, and they have this like weird demon laugh. I think that was really effective. But just like the little blah 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 blah, like beaker kind of language, I didn't like. I wish that was, if I had a little magic wand of douchiness, because I'm that guy, like talking, oh, if I could change killer clowns from outer space 32 years later, I would, I'm gonna be that guy. I would get rid of the clown language, keep the crazy laughter though.
Yeah, you get Dr. Bunsen Honeydew in there and beat that nonsense out of them. But I agree, the laugh is wonderful. Like it's almost iconic. Yeah. And it's fun to try to recreate. Jumping back to John Vernon, he just, like, touching on him real quick before, we move on. He exudes that authoritarian role. Granted, people know him from Animal House and everything. So, of course, it's going to be a little bit like, oh, there's fucking the Dean. But some of the stuff he added in, like the extra shots with the water, just to get a little more in on Mooney. So it's just, he came in there and he did his job and like pitched ideas. It wasn't just like, I'm John Vernon, I'm too good for this. So props to him.
Oh yeah, he was chewing it up. You could tell he was having a blast with this kind of role. It was reminiscent to like Kevin McCarthy level, like mustache twirling bad guy from like UHF. or anything Kevin McCarthy
Yes.
ever did, because he's always played the consummate asshole, right? But especially UHF, where he was like that just kind of cartoon villain. But Mooney, it was one of the best telegraphed death scenes of all time, where he even like told David, no one's gonna make a dummy out of me, and then, you know, the next scene he's a marionette for one of the clowns, and again, just like really creepy. And I like movies that you're not sure how to feel, because obviously you're rooting for him to die because he's like leaving the town to its own like demise, right? Like he's a total piece of shit. But you also like, you're seeing that, you're like, oh, that's cool, like the clown made a dummy out of him like he said he wouldn't, but it's like really fucked up. Like it's super creepy, and like the clown just like shaking his hand of like all of his innards. Like, again, a really effective scene.
It is. It's great. And like you said, it's because he doesn't play it like over the top cartoony. He could have been like, oh no, you're not going to make a dummy out of me. But he plays it completely straight. He's the only one, I think, that gets an F-bomb in the movie.
Yeah.
And he's just like, go fuck yourself. And it's wonderful, because I can't picture anybody else in that movie saying it.
Right.
Like, you get the Terenzi brothers, hey, fuck you, with ice cream. Like, it's not going to have the same impact. In the scene when he's the dummy, if you watch it, you can sort of put two and two together, but you've got the little blush, and that's the bloody thumbprints. And then I always pictured it as the clown broke his jaw off, but they're limited by their budget and technology. But it's still like, it's like the most gruesome scene in the movie, and honestly, it's to the character that deserves it the most, so it pays it off.
So out of all the scenes in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and there's a lot of them, for whatever reason, whether it be because you thought it was funny, because you thought it was like one of the scarier ones, which one is the most iconic in your opinion, or not even iconic, just your personal favorite scene of the film?
You know, it's going to be super cliche, but I like, as a kid, as a kid in the past and as a vorophile in the present, the scene with those shadow puppets really do it for me. And it's just like, you know, because you know it's building up to something, because these things are malevolent creatures, and then it just like eats these people. And once again, they don't pull punches. It's not just, you know, some stupid teens. It's old ladies. It's old people. And even though I constantly say we should eat the old, it's still weird to see on a movie,
Right.
in a movie.
Just because you eat burgers doesn't mean you want to meet the cow, right?
Exactly. I mean, I always do, because I tell them exactly what's about to happen. You know, it's a flex, but it's just a shame that they didn't do it to Titus, who, you know, I don't want to go through this and not mention Christopher Titus makes a quick appearance in this movie, showcasing all of his comedic genius and timing as dead friend after 5 minutes.
His cinematic debut. I would have to say my favorite scene, and this is stupid, but for whatever reason, it still gets a belly laugh out of me. It's literally like hot chick number 1 or whatever opens the door, and then you get the pizza delivery clowns, and she just literally like looks at these terrifying clowns standing in front of her and goes, "Oh, pizza." Like, for whatever reason, that's going to be the last thing I remember before I die, before I leave this, you know, world. I'm going to just remember, oh, pizza. And then the Jack in the Box clown, you know, pops out of the pizza and shoots her in the cocoon. I don't know.
It just raises so many questions, for one. And hopefully the last thing that happens to you in this world isn't that you get attacked by clowns that are masquerading as pizza delivery men. But so did she order the pizza? And if she didn't, why is she, you know, excited to see it? Why is she answering the door or in like lingerie if she has no idea who's coming over?
Right.
And it's like, you see even one of those clowns, you're going to be like, get the fuck out of here and close the door. Like, what would have happened if she closed the door? Would they have just kicked it in? Like the whole porn setup, and it just goes in a complete different direction.
Right.
Which, you know, plays into the humor, but that's also a great scene that apparently took them a lot of time to put it together, because just getting the clown through the pizza box and then getting the hand and the clown through the pizza box,
Sure.
But it's worth it. It was one of the ad scenes, I think.
I think her reaction isn't even excitement. It's just acknowledgement that there is a pizza. Because I don't, she didn't order it.
Yes.
Just pizza. Like, she just, like, names what they have in their hands, and I'm just like, fuck, thank you. It's just perfect. So we're coming to the end of our journey through the big top with the Dooker. What do you think is the legacy of Killer Klowns, and are we ever going to get a sequel? I know that the mouse in the High Castle, Disney, when they acquired 20th Century Fox, killed the project. Doesn't mean that it can't be sold off to another distributor. Are we ever going to get that sequel? And do you even want to see a sequel at this point?
That's actually a great loaded question. So the legacy of it is just, once again, it's the revival of the 50s and the 80s. In the same vein as the Blob remake, Humanoids from the Deep. It's a great throwback structurally. And the legacy of it, it's a great intro course to special effects and to me, movie making, especially on a low budget standpoint. And the legacy, like, obviously hasn't been forgotten because, Halloween Horror Nights had a great scare zone. It had a mediocre house, but it was still like a lot of fun for fans of that franchise. A sequel, I honestly, the haunted houses, the stuff at Halloween Horror Nights was done clearly to regenerate interest and see where the interest was. And there is an interest in it, but I don't know if it's an overwhelming interest that it's something that they have to pull out, like pull from the dead, basically. And this is where I'm sort of conflicted, whereas I think Killer Klowns itself is great. But as I mentioned earlier, oversaturating the brand or the franchise, whatever you want to call it, I don't know, like if I really need a sequel. It's one of those things where less is more. If you start going in to like the Klowns' backstory or what they actually look like and, where they're actually from, their motivations, I feel like it takes away from sort of that mystique because, you no longer get to like draw these conclusions for yourself. You just sort of are like, okay, this, and it might not be as, grand as you had built it up in your head, or like, oh, I didn't book it that way. That's not as fun.
I think you absolutely nailed it 100% because I feel like that's what they did with the Alien franchise, where we had to find out everything we can about the xenomorph when the greatest thing about the xenomorph, like Jaws, is we barely got to see it in the first film and they use it sparingly, and the mystique around it was what was scary about it. And I think that that's the same thing even with this 80s kind of silly horror comedy, is the ambiguous nature of the origins of why these particular beings from outer space happened upon our Earth. And obviously it's not like they did it at random, because they did enough research to try to like be somewhat appealing to what they thought humans liked, like a clown, something inviting and fun, something that lets your guard down so they could turn everyone into a milkshake. So I think you 100% nailed that. I personally, and I thought that I was one of the only ones, but I'm glad that you and I agree, do not need a sequel to this. I don't need a reboot. I think that, flaws and all, everyone should go see Killer Klowns from Outer Space, whether you're a millennial, zennial, whatever you are, especially if you're into filmmaking, because this thing shows you how to do movie tricks correctly and on a budget. And it's just a beautiful thing from start to finish. This has been an absolute blast. I want to thank my special guests. It's not every day that we get royalty on the Cult of Film. So, Your Majesty, King, the whatever moniker, I am your servant, my friend, the Dooker. Look into this camera and tell everyone what you're up to and how to find you on the interwebs.
Before I do any of that, John, I just want to thank you again for having me. I had an absolute blast. I hope we can do this again with more movies. If you want to find me, and I can't imagine why you would want to find me, John is a great man that can stomach me, but I don't expect you to do the same. You can find me at Twitter and YouTube at King Dooker. And I do have a Facebook. It's Reviews from the Dooker. Full disclosure, I'm not as active on the Facebook page as I am on the Twitter and the YouTubes. I do like to do my little reviews. I like to keep them short. If you're looking for a deep dive, go to my man John right here. Or, It's out there for you.
Once again, thank you so much for joining me. If you do want to follow this on Twitter, at The Cult of Films, all undercase, very easy to find. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at John the Host. This will be uploaded to all your podcasting sites. Also, it will be up on your iTunes, Spotify. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever you want to do. YouTube, blah, blah, blah. It's just what we have to say at the end of these. So, you know, the Killer Klowns from Outer Space is a classic Dooker. I would be remiss if we don't send this one down to the Porcelain God. Why don't you flush us out?
Oh, God. Listen, I like biscuits and I like pies. And did those people die at the end?
Oh.